We celebrated our first year in November, and I'd like to take an opportunity to thank some of the principals who've helped bring this about. First off, I'd like to thank our law librarian, Lori Avala Olson. Without Lori, we would not be functioning as well as we are right now, and she deserves a special tip of our hat for getting lawyers in the library online. I'd also like to give a shout out to our board president, Christine Fowler, and our vice president, Tracy Barrett, who have both been very, very supportive of this program. The law library is fortunate to have a new trustee. Walt Cook Jr. joined us 2 meetings ago. That brings us back to a full board component, and we're very appreciative of that. First Thursdays came about by what we were learning about our Lawyers in the Library program. 3 years ago, we started the Lawyers in the Library program, and Ali Kwong and Emily Vance have both been board members who have been supportive in implementing and keeping the program going. Since Emily Vance left the board, I need to compliment members of both the legal community and our other board members who make this bi-weekly event what it is. Both the legal community and our board members chip in to make this program happen. Lori makes sure that we get the information so we can make decisions based on some of our programs. And this has worked for us very well for 3 years. It gave us some ideas what organizations would prove valuable to other members of our community. In the last year, we have had Paul Ash from the San Francisco Marin Food Bank. We have had members from the Domestic Center from Peace. We have had repeat visits from both the Public Defender's Office and the District Attorney's Office here in Marin. We appreciate the support. We appreciate the value that they bring in sharing programs with our community. And that brings us to the folks that are joining us tonight. For those of you that are not aware of them, we have members of the STAR program. That includes Carol Farrer tonight, a member of the Marin County Public Defender's Office. We have Dr. Ryan Dunnigan, Marin County Clinical and Forensic Psychologist, and the STAR program's program supervisor. What is the STAR Court, and why would it be important to members of our community? The acronym stands for Support and Treatment After Release. Stop and think for a moment. This is a court-supervised program with defendants who have serious mental illnesses that require medication, treatment, and other ongoing services. These individuals choose to participate in STAR Court as an alternative to traditional supervised probation. I'd like to introduce our 2 speakers, and I'd like to offer them the opportunity to decide if they would like to accept questions as they come up or wait until the end of the program.
What do you think, Carol?
I think probably wait until the end. I think we will probably cover a lot of people's questions that come up, and we don't have a really lengthy program. So I think we'll have time for questions at the end.
Absolutely, that sounds good.
If people have questions, go ahead and put it in chat, and then we can read them at the conclusion.
Thank you for having us here this evening. It's great. Once I heard about this, I was really excited to participate, and I'm also seeing some really familiar names and faces out in the screen here. So thank you for having me and for joining us tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you all for being interested in this program that that Ryan and I have worked together on for the last, I've been with the program for 5 years. I'm the assigned deputy public defender to Star Court, and Ryan is the director of the program. And he has a lot more longevity than I do in the program, even though he's very young looking. But he just told me tonight, I said I wasn't even sure what date this at the Star Court started, the inception of Star Court. And he said 20 years ago, 2001. And he was with the court at that time in a different role. He was, I think, were you a Twin Cities police officer, Ryan?
Back then I was actually a San Antonio police officer, and I was the mental health officer, and Star was just getting started, and I would just come for certain meetings, and Dr. Joel Fay was getting it off the ground, and they were really just kind of finding their footing and getting started from there. But it was great to see that, and also have just a little bit of connection with it back then. And then obviously I liked it so much that I came back and fought to be in as the supervisor. And
after receiving your doctorate.
Yeah, and after doing a little bit of work and changing my uniforms, my outfits a bit. So and now and it's been lovely. It's been amazing working with Carol, and we've seen a lot of changes. I mean, there's been tremendous changes since 20 years ago, and they did a fantastic job identifying the need to meet the needs of many of our clients and the people that were really underserved, and some that still are in Marin County. And they saw the need for it, they rolled it out, and the nice thing is it's developed since then. Some years a little bit slower than others, but it's progressive. It's becoming more and more progressive. We're starting to hopefully incorporate a lot more input from the clients, from the community, from the other, from people within the criminal justice system, within the mental health system, and it's growing, and hopefully, it's growing in a nice, in a healthy manner, and it's changing too. The dynamics are different. Carol and I were talking about that right before this started. Before our presentation started, where just even over the past 2 or 3 years, there's been a dynamic shift and dramatic shift in the clients that we're seeing, and that we're hopefully serving effectively.
Definitely. So just to kind of start from the basics, Star Court is one of 2 post-sentence treatment courts we have in Marin County. The other one is adult drug court, and ours is mental health focused. And it's really a response to the incredible number of people that have severe mental illnesses that are incarcerated. I think the stats are that 30% of the population has a severe mental health diagnosis of people incarcerated, versus about 5% in the normal population. So, every community sees a lot of recidivism, a tremendous amount of resources and costs going to the same group of people. There's many different providers that are working with these people. And so this is kind of a coordinated approach to actually find a solution. So as I said, it's post-sentence. So it's after somebody has resolved their underlying criminal matter. And they're on supervised probation. And really that probation is to participate in Star Court. And Star Court, as Denise said, stands for support and treatment after release. We also started recently, I think 2 years ago, maybe, Ryan, or less even.
About something a little bit less, yeah, just about 2 years actually, right around.
Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah, maybe a little shy of 2 years. Something called MAJIC Court, And that's a response to a lot of our clients have dual diagnosis. And it's MAJIC. And I always forget what that stands for. What does that stand for?
Marin's Alternative Judicial Integration Court. So it's a mouthful, but MAJIC is easier, and it's easier for us, easier for our clients. And it was really in response to, again, the shift that we've been seeing. We identified that over the course of the year, traditionally STAR was really designed and really effective in treating and providing programming with clients that had severe mental illnesses, and that were they would start our program. They would have a diagnosis, say bipolar disorder, or schizophrenia, or a thought or a psychotic, unspecified psychotic disorder. And they would start taking medications. They would start getting the support of the team and the program, the court, and everything would move in a really positive, ideally, and move in a really positive direction, and that would be great. You know, no stumbling, no issues whatsoever. Well, so that's great, but it's actually more magical than Magic Court, because that doesn't always happen. And as we found in recent years, you know, that was the fewer and fewer of the proposed clients were meeting that criteria or looking like that clinical presentation. They much more falling in lines with, you know, people who are struggling or having really difficulties with addiction at the same time as potentially having a severe mental illness. Or something else was even more common that we were seeing is maybe some character or some traits, some personality or some severe mental illnesses, maybe, or extreme personality disorders that were being driven by the dual diagnosis for the use of substances. So they've got the addiction piece as well as this personality piece, and what happened was that they were a little bit too clinically or psychiatrically acute to fit nicely into the adult drug court. And then they weren't, because they didn't have the severe mental illness traditionally or classically, they didn't quite fit into the STAR either. So what was happening is these people that were incredibly in need, and they were really using a ton of resources, and they were probably exhausting, you know, resources, but their lives were up and were constantly in chaos, in a state of chaos. They were just wreaking havoc in their own lives and in the community. And it was terribly sad. And they were falling in between the cracks. And whose fault was that? Well, that was ours. I mean, I think as a system and as a program. So Doug Court was saying that, no, they're too acute for us. You need to go over there. And we were saying, no, they've got too many substances on board, so you need to go back over there. And then they were falling out, and then they were finding themselves out in the community without the services of the support of the justice system or the court, and with no programming. And they were just maybe a probation officer, and that wasn't okay. So we realized that we needed to adjust it. We needed to come up with the alternative, Marin's alternative court. And that's much better designed with this more of a meet the client where they are. And if they have different challenges with the addiction and they're not quite ready to stop, or they can't stop, or they've got personalities, traits that have been really kind of disruptive or behaviorally challenging, so they haven't been successful in other programs, in STAR or in ADC or in another program, we would meet them where they are, so to speak, and then we would tailor the program to meet their needs, and as well as the needs of the criminal justice system in the community. And we put that all in place with the client, which always needs to be at the focus, that needs to be the core of it. And then we would give them what they need to be more successful. And were they stellar and always perfect and did everything just right? No, but the court also had a mindset. The paradigm was to allow for them to make some mistakes and to have some different challenges around that, and just to be okay with that. And once we introduced it, and we did some psychoeducation with the different people within our program and outside of it, we were discussing this. We have more clients in MAJIC now than we do in the STAR Court. They're both, you know, they work hand in hand in tandem with one another. But the STAR Court's still great with the traditional and the people that are really, you know, ready to make a change and don't have a lot of personality traits issues going on. And then you've got the other ones that are MAJIC that have this other clinical presentation. And so we're able to serve both of them without letting any of the clients, or hopefully having any of the clients fall between the systems of care or the different courts. Did I miss anything, Carol?
No, I don't think so. So STAR and MAJIC utilize the same interdisciplinary team, which monitors the treatment and performance and compliance of probationers that are participating in the program. So that team is comprised of the probation department. There's a probation officer. There's the clinical team. Dr. Dunnigan is the head of that. There's case managers. We have a psychiatrist. We have a psychiatric nurse practitioner. We have a representative from the public defender's office. That's me. We have a representative from the district attorney's office. Right now, that's Cassandra Edwards. We have peer support, mentors that participate. Oftentimes there is a recovery coach or mentor that also is a part of it. I don't think I'm forgetting anyone.
The therapists, the psychological interns as well.
Right. Yeah. Right. So there's probably a good 12 people sitting around the table. Oh, yeah. Working with each, you know, on each case. So who participates? You have to have a qualifying offense, and we take misdemeanors and felons. They have to be found eligible by the district attorney's office. They're the kind of the gatekeeper. The most offenses are eligible. There's certain exclusions, kind of the higher end offenses like murder. We don't have murderers, but most offenses would qualify, and there has to be a nexus of the underlying offense with their mental illness. So it's not enough just to say somebody committed a criminal offense and they happen to have a mental illness too. It really is that nexus of their mental illness was driving their underlying criminal behavior. So once that's determined, Ryan would make an assessment of their ability to be successful in court. And, you know, primarily it's what is the underlying severe mental illness, which you might think would be kind of an easy thing to figure out, but oftentimes it's not. A lot of people don't have a history that they've of history of treatment. Or maybe they've had old diagnoses and never followed up with any further treatment or medication. So that's Ryan's job, to kind of figure out whether or not they'd be suitable for the court. And I don't know, Ryan, is there other things that you would look at in order for a participant to get the green light?
No, and again, there are two components. Once they meet the legal criteria, that's when they get sent over to me, as Carol said, and to do the assessment. And I mean, one big thing is that the client needs to be, because it is a voluntary program, is that they need to be willing to participate in the program. And it's a long program, so it's not something that's always going to be really enticing and inviting to people who, you know, for certain individuals who, you know, I think it could be a year, up to a year, or it could be a year and a half long. And that's a long time for anyone. And so if they're ready for that, and we can meet their needs, I sit down with them and we try to explain it, and I try to tease out whether or not they truly have a mental health, you know, a severe mental illness, and if they could work effectively. It's really, really nice now having both STAR and MAJIC to choose from, because frequently in the past I would have to say, sorry, you're you've got a lot of violent, you've got a lot of violent tendencies and history, and you're kind of explosive because of the personality disorders and because you're still using methamphetamine, and to put you with some really vulnerable folks in STAR would be really unethical and really just not okay on my part to do that. And then I would have to say, well, why don't you just get sober and then come back? And that always made me feel really bad, because you're treating one part of it rather than the other. And again, I was kicking the can. I was kicking the can down the road, and that wasn't okay. Now we can say, okay, you may not be ideal for STAR, but we can put you with other programming that's specifically designed to meet your needs and the challenges that they might have. And the program tends to be shorter, and it can also be tailored. So harm reduction, more tailored to the needs of that client, and just a little bit more creative and a little bit more forgiving. It makes my job a lot easier, and it makes it easier for the clients to want to participate. And once they want to, we've seen it before. You can want the client to change as much as you can really want them to, from every level, from the judge down to us and to their peers. But if they don't want to change, or if they're not provided with the support and to make those changes and the opportunity to do so, they're most likely not going to be able to not do that or have the desire to try. And so now we've just trying to move all the obstacles, as many as we can, out of the way to open it up to all of these folks, so that they're being served in the right place with us, with peers, and with a very informed and a great team, I think. And can get them what they need so that they can be successful. Because our principle, our motto within the program is a recovery model. And and that means different things to different folks, but we really want them, for me, it means to get them, provide them with whatever they need so that, and they could be, successful. So successful that they can, whatever their success looks like in their life, and that they can move in a really positive trajectory in our program, and more importantly, once they're out of the program, so that we can kind of let go of the bike, and then they can go on their own. And then they can also come back to our community program if they do need a little bit more support, or a little bit more, a little bit more programming or therapy or something along those lines, a little tune-up for that machine.
Right. I mean, I think most of our participants are the high need, high risk people. They're unhoused, usually unemployed, and they have co-occurring disorders. But I think one of the key elements of STAR and MAJIC Court is the judicial involvement. So there's very intense judicial oversight. Pre-COVID, we had our participants meeting weekly in the court at a court hearing. So that was required for the first 6 months of the program. They had to show up in court and answer to a judge. And the hallmark of the program is honesty. This is a voluntary program. Nobody's forced to do it. They've given a commitment and clear expectations that they want to change, that they're motivated. So I give the participants a lot of credit, because they are signing up for a lot of oversight, and it's judicial oversight. Now, that said, the wonderful thing about it is that most of the clients develop a really wonderful relationship with the judge. And I think that it goes both ways. I think that it's a really good educational piece for our bench to get to know defendants in a long-term and more introspective way. As Ryan said, the program right now is 1.5 years. So there's kind of a 3-phase program. The first phase, the first 6 months, is very intensive. It's just to get the services in place and assess what the individual needs are. It's an individual treatment program. So Ryan's team comes in and assesses, well, Do you need anger management? Do you need help with employment? Do you need just basic life skills? Do you need an ID? Do you need therapy? Do you need DBT? You know, we're kind of full service, and that's the wonderful thing. So the case manager kind of oversees each client and does a case plan. And as Ryan said, it's in conjunction with each participant, and we get buy-in. So there's a lot of empowerment given to each client to realize that we're all here to help you. It's not just to make sure that you're following probation and the terms and conditions of your sentence. It really is, we want to establish the groundwork here, and it's really hard to get somebody to a point of most people are non-compliant to compliancy. Most people aren't housed to housing. Most people aren't employed to employment. Most people don't have the benefits they're entitled to get them those benefits, and just basically give them the stability so that when they're finished with the program after a year and a half, they realize that all these pieces that we put in place, they're at the point where they're independent and they can continue in the STAR program. It's a community-based behavioral health program through HHS. So even though they graduate, which is pretty much the best day ever that we all love to see, because their family comes, their friends come, and everybody's so proud of them, and we've seen such growth. It's not like, okay, you'd finished, have a great life. No, they continue on with those case managers and with Ryan's program and with all the clinicians and with their psychiatrist. So that's the beauty of it. We're here to kind of have that heavy hand with probation and the judge to say, no, this is what you need to do, because there are consequences to not following the rules, to violations. And the sanctions could be anywhere from, well, we think you need to do more AA meetings, or we think you need to write an essay about why you even want to be in this program, and your motivation, to being back in jail for a few days, or being being recommended for residential treatment. So the nice thing is we have responses to problems.
And it took us a long time, I thought, to become more creative and more, to come up with different ideas where we could, so you didn't just immediately remand them and have them for something that they did, that they would go back to jail. And when I first started with STAR, that happened much more frequently. There were fewer options available, and so somebody would do something and they would go back to jail. And I think a lot of us were scratching our heads and saying, I don't think there's a great deal of change. For some people, like a reset and for being safer and getting sober, there's some benefits of actually being remanded. I get that, but for most people, it wasn't a miraculous turnabouts just simply because they went back to jail. That really didn't do anything. There wasn't any growth. And then they just felt, like it just didn't seem to benefit them, and they felt like they were, getting the short end of the stick. And then you had to overcome the resentment there and work through it. So we realized that that's not a good approach. We just make sure that they understood. They communicated honesty was part of it. If they were struggling, they needed to just tell us, and we were okay with that. And then we would put different things in place to help them be more supportive and more successful. And we'd pick them back up. And then again, like I said, we'd come up with different ideas around it but mostly more and more around treatment rather than like punitive action and responses on that, in that area. So, but yeah, I think I thought it was, I've always just been so surprised. You would think, most criminal justice systems and the judges are fire and brimstone, and people, they really dread going to see the judge. And that's typically what happens when the clients first start in STAR or MAJIC. And then within a couple months, they're like, "Hi, Judge, how are you?" And everyone kind of, the dust settles and they get more comfortable. They share personal stories, and our judges have been just amazing, really building up the relationships with them. And the more involved they are, and the more they get to know one another, and the richer the dynamics, we found the more successful the client is. Why? Because it's human and it's humane, and it's the way that it should be done. And we've been seeing it grow and grow and grow. And we have some pretty young folks in as clients right now. And so we've shifted to try to meet them and try to, connect with them. And it's more challenging as I'm getting older, but we're trying. And we've got a great crew and a great new judge who just started this month, right, Carol?
Right. She hasn't even quite started yet, actually. Our first court, which we're doing them all via Zoom, is on the 14th.
That's right.
So it's Judge Beth Jordan, who's coming on board after Judge Sheila Lichtblau had the court, I think, for 2 years.
Just about 2 years. And I mean, the court's just been, even though it's a little bit strict and it seems like it's got this formalized structure, there are a lot of benefits for the clients. They truly are. But besides just the support around getting housing and getting therapy and getting the different programming, just the relationship with the court, having the structure, the go-to person of having Carol right there and having Cassandra right there for legal advice and suggestions and support and encouragement. And then, to trying to struggle through or to make their way through the different program, all the way to the very end. And as Carol mentioned, the graduation dates, they're profound. I mean, they're really amazing. There have been many times when there's some pretty teary-eyed, folks throughout the courtroom. And
mostly the parents.
Most of the parents, sometimes me. So
yeah.
Okay, once, twice. And some of these clients, that was like the greatest, the most success or the greatest recognition they've gotten in years. And so you can imagine how profound that can be for somebody who's worked really, really hard and maybe struggled along the way and then achieved this kind of success. And then is also being primed and being set up to continue to be successful out in the community. So that's a win-win for every single person involved. And then we take a lot of, we're very proud of that when that takes place. And now when we're finding that things aren't working out, we just put a pause on things and we confer, we talk and we assess, we talk to the clients and figure out the best ways to address that. And right now with COVID and whatnot, and working virtually and working in smaller groups, we found that we're a little bit more, we can do that. We have to be more flexible and more fluid in this day and age. And it's going to work with our programs in the future, and it's going to work for our future clients as well. I hope.
Yeah. And I think, it's been quite a challenge this past year just because resources are so limited due to COVID. But it's still working. And people are, and I'm happy to say that our participants have still been successful, and they've still been able to stay on the program, which is very commendable, not having really the level of supervision and support that they did 10 months ago. So that's a real testament to, I think, to the success of the program. Most people do graduate. Most people make it through the year and a half. And I continue to hear from post-STAR graduates that this was the best thing that ever happened to them, that they have the stability in their life now that they didn't have before. And they continue to work with the STAR program voluntarily, which is really what we're after. It's not to say, can you get through probation? And we'll help you do that. We want people to get through probation successfully, certainly. And our clients usually are the ones that weren't able to do that. So that's a real success. But it's really after they graduate from Star Court and still continue to utilize those services. And I do want to make sure that we acknowledge a lot of other community partners that we use, like Integrated Community Services, which has been wonderful, working with our clients, Buckaloo, Casa Renee, Ryan, I know there's other ones we do, Helen Vine, Center Point.
We've got tremendous Marin Treatment Center. We've got Mobile Crisis, and we've got different representatives throughout the community, and our partners are
Mill Street Shelter,
Mill Street and Ritter, and just they're fantastic. And without them, we either wouldn't be successful or wouldn't be as successful. And then our clients. And speaking of success, I just think, I bet a lot of people are wondering, well, how do you judge or how do you know if you're being successful? Well, a lot of these clients are very high, users of different services, as we mentioned, and that could be going to jail, or it could be the police response, or going to hospitalization for the crisis stabilization unit or one of the hospitals. And those are incredibly expensive, and it's also just and sometimes potentially dangerous and very disruptive to the community, to the client, to the facilities. And so being able to kind of even to decrease that, or just a little bit, which is a tremendous benefit for the community, financially and otherwise. And what we find is that it's not just a little bit. We decrease it exponentially. Most of our clients, particularly if they're in the program, in the court program, they're not reoffending. They're actually not utilizing any of the services anymore because they're contained within our own program. We have all the therapy, we have all of our clients, and we have the different relationships and the partnerships, so they don't need to utilize, or they don't need to go to these extremes or be in these situations where they're without a home and without the medication and without the support they need. With that, they tend to really do well. And so most of the incarcerations, sometimes those will come from the program because they're having some different issues or they weren't able to comply, but it's very rare that it's ever like an offense against somebody else in the community. That's almost non-existent once they're in our program, which is fantastic. They're not going out and utilizing the hospital services anymore because they don't have to. They're not going to the crisis stabilization unit because they don't have to. And they're not going to jail, and they're not having law enforcement interaction nearly as much. And sometimes most times what we're hearing with law enforcement interaction is that they report, they're like, oh yeah, I said hi to one the other day. We're like, okay, that's great. You should do that. That's very nice. These are very good. And then, as Carol said, doing that well, that's fantastic. But how do they do once they're done? Once they're out of that program, they're not on probation. Are they still successful? And the answer is yes, because they go back to school, they get jobs, they have healthier relationships, they rebuild hopefully with their families or with their loved ones and with the community. They get more. They have. They just have pride again and belief in themselves. And again, with still some support because we haven't let go of them completely and abandoned them. And we give them, with our community programs, we try to put things into place so they can just keep going and then keep that recovery going and being more and more successful. And everyone in the community benefits from that. I live here in Marin, and I love it. I love seeing when I'm driving around with my kids and I get to see my clients and that used to be in Star Court, and there they are and they're working, or I see them in a store and they're shopping there. It's fantastic. And that's when I know it's a success. And we've seen a lot, right? We've a lot of good success stories and very
absolutely. Yeah, and I think you're right, Ryan. It's really a huge benefit to public safety. It's a huge benefit to reduction of costs as Ryan described. And it's a huge benefit just to individual lives. And the first thing I get to, luckily I get to see the clients, the participants from day one. And the question I ask them, and they're often in jail still, is, are you ready to change? And the answer is yes. And that's the first step to get into the program and be successful.
I'm sorry, I was just typing in I was responding to someone's question in the chat. I totally neglected it. Somebody had asked, what is the age range of the participants? And the answer is 18 years old or older.
Yeah.
You know, we've actually gotten some 18-year-olds, and they're just, and sometimes they were from the juvenile justice system and they came over to us, or that they had picked up charges, and we circled the wagon as quickly as we could so we could try to get them into the credit, hopefully move them out of the criminal justice system into the mental health system, and then out of all systems if possible. But but yeah, and there's no cap. We've had actually people in their 70s in STAR before.
I think we skew younger, at least we are now. And here's the interesting thing. Right now, I think there's 15 participants. They're all male. We have no females.
Nothing. In our community program, the STAR community program, we have a lot of females, but in the actual courts themselves, we don't. And we see this in waves. We've been, and that may not be a terrible thing. Some people are like, oh gosh, you're not being, sensitive to that demographic. Sometimes that could be a good thing because they're not picking up felonies right now. So that might be, I'm like, let's kind of look at this in a positive manner, people. So, and sometimes there are also other offenses that are, that the female inmates, particularly, that we come across, they have different kinds of crimes that we're seeing, and they don't always qualify, or not best served by our program. But we've had many females in the past, and it goes in waves. And I hope we get some more in so that we can work with them, and it just makes it even more dynamic and more diverse, and that's always really fun.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think right now we have a lot of young men.
Yeah, we do. We do, and unfortunately, and thank goodness for MAJIC, because a lot of these kids or young men have the dual diagnosis, and methamphetamine is terribly destructive. It's so damaging, and it's particularly when they're that young. The brain hasn't even developed fully until the age of 25, sometimes 50 if you're a man. So sorry, I would say that. I was taking a shot at myself. It's not good. I mean, they start using these incredibly powerful narcotics, and it impacts their brain, their development, their ability to handle, tension and stress and interact appropriately within the society. And then boom, they end up with us, and it's a struggle to get them especially in that first 6 months, to get them kind of get them sober if we can, get them have them start working the programs with us to be compliant, and just to kind of settle into it. I mean, they're 18 years old. It's a struggle enough to kind of figure out what they're doing and deal with the natural hormones that are going on in their body and the chemicals that are going on, much less with methamphetamine addiction and withdrawals. So we're having some trouble with that, but we are, again, trying to make it more and more robust and to meet them where they are. They're not, if they're using again, they're not going straight back to jail, because that's not clinically indicated and not helpful. However, we just circled the wagons and used Road to Recovery and Marin Treatment Center, AA, or whatever that speaks to them, and Helen Vine, and different other programs and supports that are out there. Mm-hmm. So it's causing us to be a lot more creative,
right?
Which is a good thing. And I know that the time is. Do we want to ask?
Yeah, if there's any questions about anything that we spoke about, we're welcome. We welcome them.
I think there's one question from Mark Solomon.
Okay.
I have never heard of MAJIC. Ryan mentioned more participate in this. Can he describe more detail comparing both, and what is the reason to choose one over the other? I think you talked about the criteria a little bit about that.
Sure, absolutely. The difference is that STAR is more along the lines of just severe mental illnesses without a substance component, and or an extreme personality component. So personality disorders, particularly like antisocial personality disorder or borderline personality disorder, narcissistic or histrionic. And these, when they're, particularly when those are coupled with substances, create just a whirlwind and really challenging clinical presentation from these clients, and they weren't successful in the traditional STAR, which was very good with meeting justice folks with a severe mental illness who would take medication and who didn't have addiction problems or substance use disorders. And so the MAJIC was created so that we can now work with those folks in STAR, but then better serve these new clients who have the dual diagnosis of the mental illness, personality disorders, and or substance use disorders. And and it's more of a harm reduction versus the traditional kind of probationary court.
So there's three more questions. Susan asks, people with major mental health challenges such as schizophrenia and psychosis may not recognize they are acting inappropriately. They may not know what is real. Are they able to be successful in the programs?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The interesting part is we really rely on our first, I'd say the public defenders and the attorneys, as well as some of the staff members in the jail, so that we can identify the needs of these people who potentially could benefit from these programs. And they may not have the insight to know that I want to do STAR or that would benefit me. They may not even be medicated at their time, and they may be very symptomatic. But if we can identify them early enough and we see that they meet the criteria legally, then we would go identify them, work with them, and see if they'd be open to the medication piece or the different programming. And we try from a whole bunch of different angles to not, to convince them of doing it, just to see if there's moments that there would be a little bit more clarity that would allow them to be able to understand what we're talking about, or have an opportunity for them to at least try out our program. We have a kind of this honeymoon period that we encourage people to utilize. And clients who aren't quite sure if they should do it or not, and I'm only going here because my attorney told me to. Okay, that's fantastic. Come see come to the court, see how it plays, how it works, how the interaction between the judge and the team and the clients. And if it works for you, or if it speaks to you, and if you also would like to benefit from getting housing and medication and therapy or whatever you need, or education or occupation, then why don't you give it a try? And that seems really kind of inviting to them because they don't have anything to lose. And if they may get out of jail for a day or an afternoon, so just to visit. So it's a win-win situation for them. And most people who do come find that they're like, oh, this isn't very threatening at all, and I'll do it, and begrudgingly, even if it's just to get out of jail. But they do have to they do have to be medication compliant. That's one of their criteria, whatever that is. They get to work with our medication providers, find out the dosage and the medication that works best for them. They're not directed to take something that they don't want to, but they want to work with them. And they do need to be medication compliant during our program. And that doesn't speak to every client. Some don't want to do that, and that's fine. That's their opinion. They're adults, and hopefully they have the wherewithal to make that decision. But if they come into it, they are expected to take some medications, and regularly we'll see them really with the medications and with that support and getting out of jail and getting a roof over their head first. They do amazingly well, very, very well. And only, again, only complicating factor is if there's a strong addiction component, and then we really need to work on that as well. But the mental health piece, we really have down because we've been doing it for 20 years. It's the co-occurring that's much more challenging, and we're still working on client by client.
And I think that's a really good question too, because, you know, I think we have to always remember that mere, you know, medications aren't the magic key, and it's not going to resolve a mental health needs immediately, or you know, or you know, maybe for a lifetime, but it helps. We have a collaborative team that meets before every court hearing. So we would meet for an hour and a half, and let's say somebody's behavior is problematic. Well, we have a psychiatrist there. We have our mental health providers saying, this is the reason they're acting like this. This is why you're seeing that. It's not volitional. It's not intentional. They're not trying to manipulate something. They really don't have the ability to maybe act the way you want them to at this point in time. So whereas that might be something that would land somebody back in jail, it's something that we educate ourselves on, or we have that collaborative approach to say, okay, well then we definitely need to maybe have them reassessed, or start with some type of specific therapy like DBT, or, you know, just figure out what it is that we can do to, if anything, but to make this person successful, and not say, well, you're bad, it's your mistake. No, it's realizing that this is beyond a lot of our clients' control, and how can we respond to that appropriately without being punitive.
The clients with the schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and the psychotic disorders, they, and I hate to say this, but when I see the diagnosis right out of the gates, I'm like, oh, good, good, because mostly, and the reason why I say that is because they're most likely to be successful in our program with the medication, because if they're psychotic, it usually means suggested that there's a chemical imbalance, or there's something that's going on that we can address. Either and with the right medication, it could kind of part the clouds enough, and then they're historically very, very, very successful in our programs, and they're delightful to work with too. I mean, a lot of them have not had, you know, they've had really tough times, or didn't have the support they needed, or didn't have a roof, or they've been outside in the streets for a long time, or whatever their situation is. And you give, you know, if you give a flower some, you know, a little bit of water here and there, they just, you know, bloom. They do great. And so yes, I think they're some of my, I love seeing that, and they do really, really well. I just would love to see methamphetamine go away forever.
And don't we all?
Yes.
The next question is from Tony. Does the client have to have repeat criminal offenses and or many CSU stays? And if so, why not treat them when client has first offense? Regarding motivated to change, many have anosognosia. And how do you deal with this? How do you ensure they take their medications, therapies, etc.? And what's your percentage of success? Sorry, that's a long one.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions. And yes, let's see, let me tackle it from the beginning.
To answer the first question is that somebody can just have one offense, and that's their only offense, and absolutely they can participate. These are not just recidivists. A lot of people are, but that there's no requirement of that.
And that's usually really, again, a suggestion that they're going to be very successful, because they do not, I mean, or it means that there was some punctuated event where that something happened at that moment where the behavior deviated, or their presentation changed. And sometimes, you know, it was they were manic at the time, or psychotic, and then they get back on their medication, and they're like, oh, what did I do? And then they have to kind of rebuild or go back from there. So STAR is nice in the sense that they may have picked up a felony offense, but by the time that they graduate from the program, it gets either adjudicated completely, it gets expunged, or it gets knocked down to a misdemeanor. So it's not going to impact their work or their future. So, and usually typically they do fantastically well throughout. They just fly through the 1.5-year program. So we do see that quite frequently. Particularly if they're very young and they maybe never had no history of psychotic disorder or mental illness before. It was its first presentation and first expression, and they acted out. Well, yeah, that makes sense. And then they picked up felonies. Should they be held against them for the rest of their life? No, absolutely not. This is a great opportunity for them to get that treated, get stabilized, get some psychoeducation around it, and so maybe avoid that again, that track again in the future. And for the motivation to change, many have, which is that's a clinical term for lack of no insight. And yeah, that happens, and sometimes the benefits of the court sometimes are enough to incentivize them to participate for getting going through it.
I'm very persuasive.
Very persuasive. It doesn't definitely, Carol.
No, but I think a lot of times people are incarcerated and they're motivated to get out.
Yeah.
And when they know that their sentence may include time in custody, maybe 60 days, 120 days, and they know that STAR could stay that time and get them out and get them into Casa Rene and find them housing. It's like, well, so that's a motivating factor too. And, I always, if somebody's successful in the program, we always try, as Ryan said, to get them maybe off of probation early. Right now, probationary periods are 3 years. That law just changed as of January 1st to either 1 year or 2 years. But when you're looking at a 3-year probation and you know that maybe you can get off a little early and get your record expunged. So there's kind of carrots to motivate people where maybe they wouldn't normally want to participate, with knowing that, maybe they think they don't really need it, but there's benefits. So it kind of leans them in that direction.
And then for the percentage of the success, it varies, and sometimes there's delayed success, if you will, where some of the clients, they get set back a couple months or they need to have a reset. And so they might have to do a little bit of the first, part of the program again because they weren't stable or they used again or they weren't, something along those lines. And so they might get set back, and then their program overall might be a couple extra months. But we always try to get people to graduate. I mean, that's our goal. We don't want them to be kicked out. So especially in STARS, I say the success rate is about 90% or more. And then MAJIC is a little bit newer and much more complex. And we've got much younger kids that are much more impulsive and have a much, very colorful presentation, and they're very challenging. But what we did is, again, we just tailored to them, and we try to I don't know, the idea of success is a little bit different from them. We want to keep them out of jail. We want to keep them safe. We want to keep them sober. We want to keep them from hurting themselves or anyone else and moving in a positive direction. So because it's newer and we just started it, the data, we're still going to hold off a little bit. I mean, I don't know what the data is. We need a couple more years to really have a good sense of that. But they're not reoffending nearly as much. They're not picking up felonies, and they're not utilizing these different services. So in that regard, I think that they're tremendously successful. And some of them are having a great time and actually feel supported and are getting housed. If nothing else, that's a success in my mind.
I want to be cognizant of your time. It's 7 o'clock or 7:02, but we have 3 more questions.
Okay.
What is your nexus with Laura's Law?
Our
Yeah,
next, yep. Go ahead, Carol.
I don't think there is one. What would be your?
Well, actually, it's interesting. Michelle Johnson, I think she's on here, but so AOT or Michelle, it's actually a different program altogether. Laura's Law is specifically is its own program. I don't want to point to anyone, but there's maybe somebody here who's on in part of that program, and she's fantastic, and she's helping out with that. So that's its own unique program. It has its own criteria and needs to specifically work with them. And ours is a court program and is supposed to be serving a slightly different demographic, actually quite a bit of different demographic. But thank goodness for that program.
And then what kind of budget does Star Court have?
Not a big enough one. Yeah, but I think that's going. It's not. I actually don't know. I mean, I don't have a set budget, and it's kind of it changes. We're not a housing program, so we really are reliant upon getting the services through all the different community partners, and that tends to be the biggest cost. And then we also utilize the different services within our county that are already established. So we don't utilize very much. We don't cost very much, and but we provide. We really utilize the different existing, the different tracks and programs and different services that already exist within Health and Human Services.
And then has anyone studied the cases to see if there's a pattern of when things started to go wrong with an idea of early identification prevention?
Oh, well, I mean, so for like in the terms of early, as in early associated with their diagnosis or their mental illness, or age-wise, or I'm not getting the question.
Barbara, if you want to unmute yourself and maybe explain it.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Ryan. Good to see you again.
You too.
Well, it'd be nice if a lot of these things could be avoided in the first place, a lot of the deterioration and so on and so forth. And I know with severe mental illness, there's often what they call the prodromal signs, that happen before the actual psychotic break, for example. So are those ever identified? I mean, there are the lucky few that are identified and get to go over to UCSF and get into that program over there. But I mean, just generally in schools, in high school, for example, or I mean, can you look at all the cases you have? So this would be a good project for a PhD student. They could look at all the, gather the information out of the cases that have come through these two programs you're talking about, and see if there isn't a pattern. They can say, oh yes, if this happens in, say, 10th grade, then we know it's a very good likelihood that this other thing might happen later on. And so they can sort of then maybe get some intervention at that time if necessary, and hopefully then avoid Star Court or MAJIC and all the suffering that they go through, as well as everybody around them, their families and such. So that was just my question.
Oh, no, 100%. I wish there were more and more of the studies in the early interventions and really trying to tease out the different prodromal symptoms and the expressions and different behaviors. And it's just anything that would indicate it and get us to be able to intervene earlier, because all the research shows that if you can intervene earlier, with medications or with different psychoeducation and different programming, you're going to get a better result. And everyone, and I don't ever want to equate mental illness with criminogenic or criminality, because if somebody has schizophrenia, it doesn't mean that they're going to be more likely to be having offenses. Actually, they're much more likely to be the victim of different crimes than to be perpetrating them. But it would be really nice if we could pick up on those and be more informed, and so that we could better serve the different folks and the clients clients. And I don't think that there's nearly enough money going into that, and different. I mean, we do have we have different infancy programs that are in our county, and we're trying, but I would love to see more and more. So let me know and I'll vote for it.
Okay.
I'd like to take the opportunity to thank both Ryan and Carol tonight. I know from a personal fact that at least one of them has had a very long day to begin with, and I suspect the other is no less innocent. The fact that you took time to be with us this first week that we're fully back, I want to let you know how much we appreciate it. I want to let you know that I think these are exactly the kind of discussions we'd like to involve our community in and have them better understand the services that are available. Thank you so much. I hope you won't be strangers, and when the time is right, we would love to have you back again. Thank you so much.
It's been our pleasure.
It has been. Thank you so much. Great to see you.
And we're happy to provide our email addresses on the site, because, you know, oftentimes I speak to family members and loved ones of our clients and answer questions and see how we can get people into the program. And so we're happy to do so.
Great.
It would be our pleasure to be planning in the future. We would love to have any information that you'd be willing, and we would invite practitioners that are interested in this who'd like to submit more information to us. Lori is always looking for referrals. Take a look at our website. If you can see areas that we might improve in this arena, please let us know.
So much. It's been a pleasure.
Everyone have a lovely evening.
Right, and thank you all for coming. Our next session will be in the first Thursday in February, which I think is February 4th, and we'll have someone from Marin Community Clinic. So look for that on our website and in our notifications so you can attend that as well.
The best to you, stay healthy and happy, and please don't be strangers at an upcoming event.
Take care.
Good night.